Welcome to the Mystery Revealed. Today we embark on a journey that weaves together art, history, mystery, and secret knowledge as we explore the hidden codes within the works of one of history's greatest geniuses, Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo was no ordinary artist. He was a polymath, a painter, inventor, anatomist, engineer, and visionary. He left behind not only exquisite paintings, but also countless sketches and notebooks filled with mirror writing, cryptic diagrams, and strange inventions that continue to captivate the world. Some believe these notes and images hold secret wisdom, that Da Vinci deliberately encoded knowledge in his artwork for those initiated enough to see beneath the surface. Today, we'll examine several of Da Vinci's most renowned creations, from the Last Supper to the Mona Lisa, unveiling cryptic motifs and symbolism. We'll probe how his intellectual breadth, rumored connections to esoteric movements, and insatiable curiosity might have driven him to embed hidden messages in his art. Join us on this journey of discovery as we shine light on mysteries that have remained concealed for centuries. The Renaissance context and Da Vinci's mind. To understand the hidden messages in Leonardo's art, we must first immerse ourselves in the world he inhabited. 15th and 16th century Italy was a hotbed of intellectual fervor, an era we call the Renaissance. It was an age of rediscovery of classical philosophies, occult traditions, secret societies, and alchemical experiments. Da Vinci stood at a crossroads where art, science, and esotericism converged. Leonardo's notebooks show that he was more than just a painter. He studied anatomy in secret, dissecting human cadavers to understand the body's structure in pursuit of perfection on the canvas. He explored botany, mechanics, optics, and architecture. Some scholars argue that Da Vinci's broad intellectual pursuits influenced his painting style, imbuing it with layers of meaning accessible only to those willing to look beyond the obvious. Moreover, the spirit of the time included coded messages, ciphers, and secret rituals, often passed down through societies that guarded their knowledge. It is plausible that Da Vinci, who was undoubtedly aware of these secret traditions, wove symbols and patterns into his works. Whether these were mere artistic flourishes or deliberate codes will always be a topic of debate, but the hints are certainly there. The Last Supper, hidden messages and symbolism. One of the most discussed works by Leonardo da Vinci is The Last Supper. Painted in Milan's Santa Maria delle Grazie convent, it depicts the moment Christ announces one of the disciples will betray him. At first glance, the scene is a dramatic religious tableau, but many researchers have noticed unusual details that don't neatly fit into traditional Christian iconography. For instance, some point to the arrangement of the apostles' hands and the formation of their bodies, suggesting geometric patterns or hidden musical notes. According to a controversial theory, if you map these hand positions onto a musical staff, it produces a haunting melody, an encoded message in song form. Others focus on the spacing and gestures that form a sort of puzzle, potentially referencing the principles of sacred geometry. In the background, the windows and architectural lines may hint at the divine ratio or highlight certain figures more than we realize. Some even suggest that Mary Magdalene, not present in the canonical sense, is symbolically represented through subtle hints in the painting's composition and color scheme. While we may never know if these interpretations are what Leonardo intended, The Last Supper invites us to question and look deeper. It's possible that Da Vinci wanted viewers who were trained in certain esoteric traditions to perceive layers of meaning, mathematical, musical, or symbolic, hidden beneath the religious narrative. The Mona Lisa, secret codes and esoteric meaning. Perhaps no painting is as famous or as enigmatic as the Mona Lisa. Millions have admired her subtle smile and mysterious gaze, But what if this captivating portrait is more than just a masterful depiction of a noble woman? Several researchers have claimed that Da Vinci embedded tiny letters or symbols within her eyes. Under magnification, some believe they can detect the letters L and V in one eye, potentially Leonardo da Vinci or perhaps La Virgine, the Virgin, linking it to a symbolic reference. Others suggest hidden landscape elements like concealed bridges or imaginary structures form part of a coded message. Da Vinci was known to study optics and perception. The hazy sfumato technique he pioneered suggests layers of meaning. The painting doesn't give all its secrets away at once. The Mona Lisa's enigmatic smile might symbolize secret knowledge, an invitation to look beyond what is obvious. She could be a visual riddle, representing a fusion of classical philosophies, feminine archetypes, and even alchemical principles that blend human physiology and divine proportion. Is she more than a portrait of Lisa Gherardini? Could she represent an allegory of the union between rational knowledge and intuitive wisdom, a key to understanding the deep mysteries Da Vinci cherished? While we cannot be certain, her image continues to provoke speculation, as if whispering truths to those patient enough to listen. Vitruvian Man, Codices, and Other Works, a web of cryptic clues. Beyond his famous paintings, Da Vinci left behind the Vitruvian Man and countless sketches and notes in his codices. These documents, often written in mirror script to keep out prying eyes, reveal a mind that delighted in puzzles and the blending of art, science, and spirituality. The Vitruvian Man, a study of ideal human proportions, has long been associated with the harmonious geometry of the human body, but some esoteric interpretations see it as more than an anatomical guide. They argue it symbolizes the microcosm and macrocosm, the idea that the human being, when perfectly proportioned, reflects the cosmos's structure. Leonardo's fascination with proportion and symmetry could hint at his belief in universal patterns, a hidden code that unites all creation. Within his codices, strange machines, anatomical drawings, botanical observations, and enigmatic symbols abound. Some say that buried within these pages are coded references to ancient mysteries, hermetic teachings, secret alphabets, and cosmological diagrams. Although mainstream scholars may dismiss these as later interpretations, the persistent allure of these hidden messages suggests that Leonardo's notes remain fertile ground for the curious. Modern investigations, legacy, and conclusion. In recent years, researchers, from art historians to cryptographers, have employed technology like infrared scanning, digital image enhancement, and advanced pattern recognition to uncover what might have been hidden for centuries. While some claims of secret messages are more sensational than scholarly, the consistent fascination with Da Vinci's art speaks volumes about its depth. Leonardo da Vinci's legacy is that of a man who refused to accept the world at face value. He believed in relentless inquiry, testing boundaries, and integrating knowledge across disciplines. Perhaps the true message hidden within his art is not a specific cipher or encoded phrase, but a timeless invitation to look deeper, think broadly, and question everything. As we conclude this journey, consider that each brushstroke might carry multiple meanings. The mysteries attributed to Da Vinci's works may reflect our own hunger for deeper truths. If we read the world like a text waiting to be deciphered, then Da Vinci's paintings stand as luminous chapters in that grand manuscript, whispering to us that knowledge and wisdom are there, just beneath the surface, ready to be revealed. Thank you for joining us on this fascinating journey into Leonardo da Vinci's art and the mysterious codes that may lie within. If you enjoyed this exploration, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with fellow truth seekers. Until next time, keep your eyes open to the hidden patterns in the world around you.